Hi guys, it's Tory, one of the registered dietitians at Content Checked. So today we are on SugarChecked because we are going to be talking about the pros and cons of a low-carb diet. So low-carb diets have been around throughout the ages. They've had some ups and downs in popularity. The Atkins Diet is one of the most well-known modern day low carb diets, and that came around in around 1972 is when Dr. Atkins first published his book encouraging a low carb diet and talking about some of the benefits from it. And he republished his book in the early 1990s, and that's kind of since then there's been a decent amount of popularity with low carb diets. So there are some benefits to following a low-carb diet, but then there are also some negatives. So one of the first things that I like to talk to people who are kind of asking about low-carb diet or just carbs in general kind of relates to what you will avoid or emphasize in a low-carb diet. So typically when people talk about carbohydrates, they're talking about grains. But if you're following a truly low-carb diet and really limiting your carbohydrate intake, you're going to we're talking about diets that are low in all carb-containing foods, which include grains, cereals, rices, those starchier foods that we usually think of carbs. But that also includes fruits, vegetables, dairy, beans, legumes, sweets. Any of those foods contain carbs. So if you're talking about eliminating carbs, those foods are going to be involved too. The only foods which contain zero carbohydrates naturally are going to be meats and oils. So sometimes people say, they're avoiding carbs, not eating any carbs, but they're, eating fruit for every single meal. So they are eating carbs. They're just kind of avoiding starches. So one of the big reasons that low-carb diets still are popular and have stuck around, because it is kind of a fad diet, but it actually has stuck around, is because you will lose weight on a low-carb diet. So if you drastically cut back on your carb intake, you will lose weight. But the caveat to that is we have a question coming in. Hold on. Okay. So we're talking about, will carbs make me fat? So this is something that I hear all the time as a dietitian. And carbs are not going to make you fat. Carbs don't make you fat. Fat doesn't make you fat. Eating a specific food is not going to just make you fat. So there's actually something that we learned when I was in college, when we were learning about the metabolism of the human body. And actually, one of the things that our teacher told us to remember for exams is that fat fuels burns in the flame of carbohydrates. So to actually run your metabolism and be processing all the food you eat, burning it off, giving you energy, you need to take in carbs. So eating carbs does not make you fat. We actually need to eat carbs. Our brains can only use carbohydrates as a fuel source. So if you ate absolutely zero carbohydrates, you would eventually die because your brain cannot use proteins or fats as an energy source. So you need to eat about 100 grams of carbohydrates a day minimum just to support brain function. So overall, obviously if you don't eat that much for a few days, you might feel a little foggy headed, but it's not going to kill you, but it's not healthy, not sustainable in the long term because we need to have carbohydrates. But kind of back to the weight loss aspect of low-carb diets is that, like I said, when you do cut your carbs, you're going to lose weight. But that's not going to be the weight you want to lose. It's pretty much going to be water weight. So the way our bodies store carbohydrates is in the form of glycogen, which is in our muscles and our liver. And 1 molecule of glycogen is going to be stored with 3 to 4 grams of water. So if you drastically cut your carb intake, then you're going to use up your glycogen stores and you're going to lose the water that's stored with it as well. So that's why you're going to see a drastic drop on the scale, but you will It's not going to change your body composition. It's not going to decrease your body fat, your lean muscle mass, nothing like that. So low-carb diets are not really sustainable for the long term, kind of like what I talked about earlier, since carbs are required for brain function and just kind of living an active lifestyle. You're going to need carbs. You can cut them for a few days, but eventually your body's going to crave them because you need them. And then once your intake goes back up, that water weight's going to come back down. So cutting carbs, the scale's going to go down, but it's not going to really change the composition, improve your health. Kind of along the same lines, Americans as a whole tend to consume too many calories and carbohydrates, especially refined and processed carbohydrates. So if someone's trying to cut their carbs, when they're talking about carbs, meaning more of a lot of refined grains, processed foods, fast foods, those kind of things, they cut those out, then they will probably see some health benefits, since the majority of Americans are overweight and obese. So reducing some calorie intake and carbohydrate intake is probably going to have some health benefits just because of the weight loss. So that is a good thing. And if you're cutting back on your processed foods and replacing them with more fresh fruits and vegetables, then that's going to be healthy. Healthier lifestyle. We just got a question about the ketogenic diet. So that is a very low carbohydrate diet. So basically the goal of a ketogenic diet is to put your body into something called ketosis, and that is when you have used up all of your glycogen stores, which again is how your body stores carbohydrates, and instead begins relying on your fat stores and your protein muscle stores for energy, because you aren't taking in any carbs and you've used up your stored carbohydrates. So it can be popular in like the bodybuilding world to kind of burn off that extra layer of fat, and that will work, but like I said, eventually you're going to be needing to eat more carbs, so that's going to come back. And it's very hard to maintain a ketogenic diet. There's test strips out there to see if you're still in ketosis, if your body's producing the ketones to use as energy, but you're still going to need to have some carbs for your brains, and like I said, it's very hard to achieve that state. Some people do follow, children, this is actually a very beneficial diet for children with severe epilepsy. Very low carb diets have been shown to help treat that. We're not really sure of the exact mechanism as to why, but it is very helpful in that specific population. But for the general population, I wouldn't recommend a ketogenic diet. We have another question from Olivia. She asked, should I limit beans if I'm trying to limit my carb intake? So beans and other legumes do contain carbs. So if your goal is to cut back on carbs, cutting back on beans would be a good thing to do. But I wouldn't really recommend that overall as a diet to follow, because beans have a ton of nutritious properties. They have a good amount of fiber and protein and vitamins and minerals. So if you are really trying to eat no carbs, yeah, cut out the beans. But again, I would never really recommend a no or low carb diet. So you can still eat your beans. Okay, no, good. I'm glad. I love beans too. So great source of protein, keep you very full. So can keep eating those. Okay, so again, okay. We have time for one more question. So asking about any nutritional deficiencies with a low carb diet. So there are a few things that you may become deficient in if you are limiting a lot of most carbs. So most grains actually all grains in America are fortified. So they're fortified with a lot of B vitamins, riboflavin, niacin, and especially folic acid. So grains are fortified with these vitamins because back in, I don't even know, 60s, 70s, we've discovered the link between folic acid deficiency in mothers and neural tube defects in babies. So the U.S. government decided to just fortify grains, since most people eat a lot of grains. It's popular. It's a cheap food, very affordable, to increase the intake of folic acid in women, particularly of childbearing age. So if you are not eating those carbs, you may get some of those B vitamin deficiencies. You can take a supplement, but it's always better to get your vitamins and minerals from food, but specifically the niacin, the riboflavin, and the folic acid you might become deficient in if you are avoiding carbs, specifically those starchy grains. So that is about all the time we have for today. So again, my name's Tory. I am a registered dietitian here at Content Checked and SugarChecked. So feel free to download our free app to kind of see the amount of sugars you might be taking in some of your foods if you're not too savvy at reading nutritional labels. Content Checked is good for people with food allergies if you kind of want to see some of the hidden ingredients in your foods. So that's all we have time for today. Thanks.